I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. On October 21st, New Brunswickers will head to the polls in the next provincial election. Here to tell us about his party and his platform is the leader of the New Brunswick Green Party, David Coon, and we will be joined later in the show by the candidate for St. Croix for the Green Party, Mark Groleau. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today, David.
Thanks for inviting me, Vicki.
So it's election season, so I have to follow election guidelines and ask all candidates the same questions with the same amount of time. So my first question for you is, what do you think are the most pressing issues facing New Brunswick today?
Well, certainly accessing health care is number one. There's no question about it. People who don't have doctors or don't have access to a nurse practitioner really are facing, especially those with chronic health problems and so on, or various health issues. It's really a nightmare. It's a nightmare for them. If you've got a family, you don't have a doctor, your kids don't have access, it's terrible. So we need to really start talking about the right to access health care and put in place the measures to ensure that everyone has access to a permanent team of healthcare providers. And I'm really excited about the possibilities. You know, when I first got elected in 2014 as the MLA for Fredericton South, I started digging into healthcare because I could see what was happening already. And my mom's a nurse, so I already kind of was interested in it. So, well, she's 92, but she's still a nurse. She says, always a nurse. Anyway, she might watch this, I don't know. So what I was amazed with was how doctors and nurses and paramedics and nurse practitioners and LPNs, and no matter who I talked to, individuals, their associations and organizations, all had a set of solutions that aligned with one another, that made good common sense. They were reasonable. They seemed like they would work. They were practical, concrete. But what they told me was, every time they try and move those solutions forward, their proposals just bounced back at them. Didn't matter whether they were a chief of the ER at a hospital, or the president of the nurses union, or whatever, or the New Brunswick Medical Society, or individual doctors who came together making, like the ER doctors all came together at one point with recommendations. So the solutions are there. We need to implement them. We need to act. The problems have been kicked down the road by government after government. So it's not like the Conservatives caused the problem, Liberals they both caused the problem by ignoring it, kicking the solutions down the road.
Which you touched on part of my second question, which is, how would your government address the shortage of healthcare professionals and improve services across the province?
Well, we need to do what's been recommended and committed to in many ways for almost 20 years, and that is establish team-based practices and community clinics that are team-based, where physicians and nurses, nurse practitioners, dietitians, and so on are working together as your healthcare team, and that it's treated like we treat access to education in the school system. There's no waiting list for kids to get into school for their education. It doesn't exist. People will be horrified and appalled. So why do we accept it in the healthcare system? There should be no waiting list. You should have a healthcare home in your community that is permanent for you. That's where you go. And just like when kids get to the age where they need, are eligible for public education, they go to their local school, or if there's an issue around the local school for one reason or another, they go to the backup school. But the same thing for healthcare. Here's your community health clinic, or here's your family practice team, and that's where you go, period. So Jane Philpott has really made this come alive in her recent book. She's the former health minister for Canada, a family doc, and now the dean of the medical school in Queen's University. Such an impressive person, such an impressive woman. I recommend her book to everyone, and she has made this come alive for me to read her book, because it was kind of an abstract idea when it was first proposed to me, when I first learned about it, but she made it come alive. They've been doing it out of the medical school. They've got medical students who want to be family docs, interning in family team-based practices like that. It's working very well. So that's where we need to go. But we need a generational investment to make it happen. because we've got to have a funding mechanism so that those team-based practices can occur. There's got to be a funding mechanism for nurse practitioners to work with physicians and nurses and dietitians and so on. So we've got to put that funding mechanism in place. So yeah, it's going to cost money, no question about it. But without healthcare, where are we? In deep trouble, and we're almost there.
The housing crisis is a significant issue in New Brunswick. What strategies would you implement to increase affordable housing and to address homelessness?
So there's a couple of things there. With respect to affordable housing, there's a couple of things. Existing housing, we need a rent cap. We need a mechanism for rent control. I brought 2 different bills into the legislature to try and achieve that, and both were defeated by the government. But we need rent cap to protect people from unaffordable rent increases. It's worked effectively elsewhere. We need to have it here. We're to the point now where unaffordable rent increases have been driving people out of their homes, and in some cases literally onto the street. Never saw that before. In terms of the supply of affordable housing, there's a couple of things we can do. One is certainly to mandate the revitalized New Brunswick Housing Corporation to prioritize their work to support the building of non-market housing, nonprofit housing, cooperative housing, and low rent housing. That needs to be mandated for them. That's easy to do. They're there. It's their job. They deliver, just as they did the last housing crisis back in the 1980s. So there's that. In terms of privately developed low-cost housing, what we would do is reduce the significant costs of operating low-cost any kind of rental housing, which is the property taxes, for lower rent housing, by doing this: attaching the property tax, property assessment system to the income from buildings. So if you've got a low-rent building you're opening up, the income's going to be lower, and your property tax will be low. If you've got a building with luxury apartments, your income's going to be higher from those apartments from that building. Your property tax is going to be higher. So that the property tax will no longer be an impediment to building affordable rent buildings. And so I believe that too would make a significant difference to private developers who want to serve that part of the market, and they exist. But it's expensive to do so the way the property tax system is structured right now.
What are
and just on homelessness, quickly.
Sure.
On homelessness, so we need to look at what's been working here and elsewhere. So 12 Neighbors in Fredericton, Marcel Lebrun's project that he initiated after traveling the world literally to see what was working, what wasn't, is an excellent model. People have their own homes, they have wraparound services, they're respected, and they are supported with what they are interested in doing, helping them to uncover their gifts, helping them to uncover their dreams, and helping them to make that happen. It's a great model. Department of Social Development has not embraced it and helped support it happening elsewhere in the province. That needs to happen. We also need housing with services that are designed for people with complex issues, mental health and addictions, that will house them and will have the appropriate 24-hour services there for them. BC has done this. It's been effective. It works. We need to do the same thing.
What are the biggest challenges facing New Brunswick's education system, and how would you address them?
The learning environment is difficult. Teachers are finding it difficult to effectively ensure that their students are learning to their full capacity. So there's a number of things that need to be done there. First, it starts with respect. We need to respect our teachers, and this is a bigger issue in the province. We've had a premier who has been disrespectful of just about everyone you can imagine, from doctors and nurses to teachers to groups of people in the province. And so that's got to change. And for me, if I were in the Premier's seat, everything would begin with respect. Everyone matters. Everyone matters. Whatever their station in life is, whatever their challenges are, however they identify, everyone matters and should and deserves the same level of respect from their leader, from their government. So a lot changes then if you start with that premise. In the school system, we need teams of mental health teams in the schools to help support kids who are dealing with crushing anxiety and depression at levels that we have never seen before. We need support for teachers so that their classrooms can be positive learning environments. And that means looking at the educational assistant system and ensuring that is working effectively. We need physical spaces where kids who are having trouble in the class, behavior problems, can go outside the class temporarily and work with a resource teacher to address those issues. Get into spaces where there's not a lot of stimulus and ensure that gradually, and this has been tried elsewhere and it works, that they'll be spending more and more time in the classroom and less time in the sort of other space, alternative space. So that's important, and that's all about really properly resourcing our inclusion policy, which has never been done. So that's key. But parents also need to trust our teachers. And what I'm hearing from teachers is that trust has diminished significantly. Teachers are professionals. Politicians need to stay out of the education system, just like they need to stay out of the healthcare system. They're not surgeons, they're not nurses, they're not teachers. They have no training for that. They shouldn't be dipping into the curriculum. That's not the role of politicians. So we need, in some ways, a buffer between the political level of government and the delivery of education to our students.
How does your party plan to tackle climate change?
So the first thing is we're not climate ready. We're already in the thick of it, as we know, with flooding, coastal storm surges, forest fires, and all the rest of it, intense storms. We're not ready. So the first thing is we've got to be climate ready, and that means ensuring we've got cell phone service everywhere, no matter where you live, so that you can get emergency messages, so that you can call out for help if you need it. You know, when we see young people dying, as we did last year in the flash floods in Nova Scotia, that's horrifying. We need to be climate ready to avoid that from happening. The same thing for communities that only have one road in or out in this province, and there are a lot. We need to ensure that people can get out of their communities if their normal way of getting in back and forth is blocked, flooded out, or swept away. So those kinds of things need to be put in place. Same thing with coastal erosion. We're not dealing with that, and we need to deal with it, and the flooding that comes from storm surges. So we would create an agency in government dedicated to ensuring we're climate ready. And people will say maybe we don't need more new agency, but we do. What I've learned after 10 years in government, I've learned a lot about government, what works, what doesn't work, where the problems are, where the bright spots are. But one of the key things I've learned is if there's no one in government who has responsibility for an important public service, then it's not going to be taken care of. It's not going to happen. No one's going to have our back. And there really is no one in government really with that responsibility today. EMO does, but their specialty isn't climate readiness. So they need that support so that they can complement the efforts to make sure we're climate ready. The other part of that is, of course, we need to do our part to reduce our contribution to the climate crisis, get our carbon pollution down. One of our biggest sources of carbon pollution is from transportation. So our view of that is we need alternatives to driving. We need rail back in New Brunswick so people can move around by mail or by rail. We need a proper bus system so people can get from Charlotte County to St. John, and that it's properly supported. We need in the cities better transit, and that all of that be linked in a seamless manner. So we have public transportation infrastructure as convenient and accessible as our road transportation infrastructure. How will we pay for that? Well, we actually would replace the consumer carbon tax that currently is on gasoline with the system they use in Quebec. It's called cap and trade, where it puts the carbon price more on the large polluters, where much of the pollution is coming from, and then that revenue would be used to help build the kind of public transportation infrastructure we need in this province. So that's our vision. One of the key things on climate. Yes, we need to focus on getting our energy demand moderated through, retrofit program for our buildings across this province, and to move rapidly to a renewable energy system as well. But transportation is the big one we've got to deal with, and that's going to take some time, so we need to start now.
We have just over 2 minutes left before we bring Mark on set. So here's your final question. What specific plans do you have to boost economic development in New Brunswick, particularly in rural areas?
So, New Brunswick, when New Brunswick thrived the most economically was when we were more self-sufficient, when we produced more of what we needed in New Brunswick. And so we would really focus on supporting the development and the existing businesses and enterprises of various kinds that produce services and products, produce food that is going to support New Brunswickers. To reduce our imports, reduce our reliance on some long distance supply chains, and produce more of what we need here for New Brunswickers and for the surrounding region outside of New Brunswick. That's not been a focus for a long time. The focus has been on increasing exports, but that doesn't trickle down to help people in our communities. If we can build our local economies around producing more to support New Brunswickers, to provide what we need, and food is the obvious example that lots of people think about. We need to be far more self-sufficient in food, all kinds of food, including processed foods, and so we need to support that kind of more self-sufficient, locally based economy in our province, which I think people would find exciting. We need to do it. We can be more self-sufficient in food, more self-sufficient in energy. We should be more self-sufficient for small manufactured products and so on. So lots of opportunities there.
Well, thank you so much for this one-on-one. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined by your candidate for St. Croix, Mark Groleau.
Great. Thanks, Vicki.
Before an election, Elections New Brunswick sends a voter information card to everyone who is on the voters list. These cards show the dates, times, and locations where electors can vote at the advance polls or on election day. Electors also have the option to vote at any returning office during the election. A voter information card isn't required to vote, but it speeds up the process. Another option available is to vote by mail. Contact the local returning office or Elections New Brunswick to ask for details on how to apply. Get the election facts from your trusted election source. Visit electionsnb.ca.
Welcome back. We are now also joined by Mark Groleau, the Green Party candidate for St. Croix. Thank you for sitting down too, Mark.
Thank you.
David, can I ask you, why is Mark the right candidate for St. Croix for the Green Party?
Because Mark will make an amazing MLA. He's all about service, and as I am. And I want all my MLAs to, first and foremost, be prepared and be driven to serve their community. No matter who. Doesn't matter. I have an open door policy at my office, the same with my other two MLAs, as it should be. He's a people person. He's about trying to find solutions and get solutions for people. And believe me, a lot of people have a lot of issues they bring to the MLA. And you got to try and find the solutions. And Mark is the guy who can do that. And he will be open to everyone.
And Mark, now to you, why should people vote for you?
Well, I could have lived anywhere, and so that's kind of the elephant in the room. I asked David early on in the process, if I'm from away, do I still have a shot of being an MLA? In 2018, my wife and I, 2017, we were sitting in Toronto looking at the bills, we have 2 young kids. We didn't own anything. We were trying to rent. We were struggling, barely making it. 2 master's degrees, debt, things like that. And we just said, how do we get out of here? No offense, Toronto. But how do we craft the life that we want? How do we live in a quieter, friendlier environment and raise our kids somewhere where we can really root? And I understand when you're renting, you're bouncing around, you're at the mercy sometimes of the market or the landlord. And we explored the whole country and landed here. And it has been incredibly rewarding. Obviously, COVID was a weird period, but getting rooted in community, buying a home, living in St. Stephen, visiting all the municipalities around. But of course, as we live our lives, the last few years, I noticed that when you're sitting around with friends, board game nights, barbecues, there's more and more conversation about, oh my goodness, I can't afford to pay the rent, or my property taxes are skyrocketing. My mom rents, my mother-in-law is on a fixed income with property taxes rising. People don't have a family doctor. My family, we became medical orphans when our doctor retired. Food is getting too expensive for many people I talk to, and these are just friends. Where's the RCMP? How come people who need shelter don't get the shelter they need? And after a while of just having these conversations socially and then seeing things in the various towns, realizing this is becoming a huge problem. And my wife works in social development, so she'd come home from work and mention these things around the kitchen table. And of course, I'm running my business, I'm raising my kids, and I think, well, the government's got this, right? Like, somebody is just solving this problem. And unfortunately, the answer was too often no. And people don't know where to go. And so that is why I decided to say, well, somebody's got to step up. And I talked to David Coon because the values of the Green Party are so in line with my values. And so I started knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, and that's what I'm seeing is those problems are all across our riding. The thing that excites me, and I am excited about the future, is that the solutions are there, and David mentioned that. You see plans on the table, you see extremely intelligent people working on these problems, but for some reason, implementing them doesn't happen. I've talked to countless community leaders and nonprofits that say, we've got the plans, we've got the funding, we send it up to a level of government and it just kind of disappears in a cloud. That's not acceptable. We live in an amazing place. We have such a great future ahead of us. And it's the despair at the doors that is really making me feel sad, because it doesn't need to be that way. It's bad enough when people can't pay for things and food bank is stretched to the limit, and we need better policing, we need shelter for people who need it. It's bad enough when the government is not providing for our basic needs, but then when you add to that a sense of, well, things are never going to change. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm hearing too much of. Well, it can't be fixed. And I just refuse to believe that, because again, I know there are amazing people in place who can, but it does take the leadership of an MLA to bring those people together. So whether I'm talking to mayors or councilors or just a resident at their door who says, I can't afford this, or I don't know the way forward on that, I believe that we have those solutions, and we should not be giving up. That's the role of an MLA, and that's the role of our provincial government.
We have less than a minute left, but I'd like to hear from both of you. Why is the Green Party the right party to lead New Brunswick right now? We'll start with David.
Well, clearly, Liberals and Conservatives have been taking turns running New Brunswick forever, and look where they've got us. So it's time for fundamental change. We need to make the kind of change that will see action to implement the solutions that are out there to make life better for our families, for New Brunswickers across this province. And our party is committed to that. We're driven by the idea that the central goal should be to support and enhance the well-being of New Brunswickers, New Brunswick families, and our communities, and that should drive government decision-making.
And Mark, final words are with you.
I don't know if it's true or not, but when I knock on doors and I hand people my thing and I say, here's what I stand for, I'm from the Green Party, the mass majority of people say, oh, I'm not a party person, I'm a candidate person. And so whether or not that's true, I like that idea, but like David said, we saw the Liberals get swept out in the previous election. Locally, removing the courthouse, we see, I go back to what a devastating impact that had on our community, which is why I really want to make sure that courthouse gets back. But that's an example of, okay, we tried the Liberals, then we went to Conservative, and it's been back and forth, and now, all of our needs are unmet in our communities with this current government. And so I hear you, if you say I'm not a party person, but it is definitely time for a change. And to me, voting for one of those legacy parties is just saying, nothing's going to change, nothing's going to get fixed, let's try the same thing again. One thing I love about the Green Party is that a Green MLA in New Brunswick has never been voted out. David Coon got elected, Megan Mitten got elected, Kevin Arsenault got elected. They've never been voted out. People love their Green MLAs because of that service piece, I really believe. Greens are working so hard for their constituents and their ridings to find the solutions, and the value of the Green Party is our common good. A decision that is good for one person needs to be good for another as well. And so that's why I'm running for the Green Party and believe it's the right solution for St. Croix.
Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you both for taking the time to come in and talk to me today. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks, Vicki.
My guests today have been David Coon, leader of the New Brunswick Green Party, and Mark Groleau, the candidate for St. Croix for the Green Party in the next election. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.